Policies change. That is to come with the rotating doors of a democratic government. However, there once were a time in Indonesia's early history where the rotating doors took much longer to turn, and its leaders created a much larger imprint onto its foreign policy than most would have been able to do now. Times were much different under the Proclamator and the Smiling General. That is, the old order of Soekarno and the new order of Soeharto. Some of the actions are clear-cut from the common knowledge, and some others are much odd to the common beliefs we have now. Many organizations were founded, many relations made, broken, mended, and many more decisions that shaped each other's foreign policy and shaped Indonesia's future foreign policy. So in this research, we seek to answer that. How do these administrations, that of the old order and that of the new order, compare to each other? How are the policies of Soekarno and Soeharto so different from each other? That is the question we are seeking to answer today.
Given the significant differences and to understand the differences of the foreign policies established during the Soekarno and Soeharto eras, it is important to compare the two foreign policies. Through both macro and micro analysis, we can effectively analyze them. With this broad perspective, macro analysis enables us to make connections between various situations and settings, resulting in a more thorough analysis regarding the overall of the foreign policy. Microanalysis, on the other hand, with its emphasis on specific case studies, offers to observe the practical applications and in-depth analysis of each foreign policy. By using both methods, we can achieve a more comprehensive understanding of how these two leaders navigated the foreign affairs and their lasting effects on Indonesia's current foreign policy.
One of the most stark differences when it comes to their approaches is in fulfilling the Indonesian foreign relations principle of free and active politics. This principle itself was created in order for Indonesia to freely participate within the international political sphere as a neutral but active force, as per enshrined in our constitution. This principle is clear in what it wants to achieve, but at the same time, it's vacant of that different governments have interpreted it differently, creating a myriad of different ways that this principle is done. The Soekarno administration is most famously known for its confrontational and revolutionary approach to politics in general, a very high-profile approach. As an avid anti-colonialist and revolutionary, Soekarno sees the young Republic of Indonesia and the other young countries of the world as the bearer of a worldwide revolution against the established orders of the world. The Western imperialist who brought colonialism onto them, as he says. His free and active politics revolves around Indonesia's fiery participation alongside these newly independent countries in order to fight against the forces of the West and against the bloc politics that dominated the Cold War era. This can be seen through the actions taken during these times. Indonesia's participation in the founding of the Non-Aligned Movement and the Asia-Africa Conference that was held in Bandung. Indonesia sets itself up to be one of the leaders in these revolutionary movements. Most apparently, however, in this high-profile approach in diplomacy, Soekarno's acts of anti-colonialism has gotten him to many issues, especially regarding the confrontasi, of which Indonesia claiming that the newly formed state of Malaysia is a puppet of the British colonial empire, and an armed conflict ensues that broke Indonesia's relations with many Western countries and, as such, its economic powers, and further isolating the country in its weird quest for revolutionary glory. While admirable in what he is trying to achieve, to show the spirit of anti-colonialism, this confrontational and high-profile approach to Sukarno's administration doomed it from the very beginning. And the economic woes that was wrought upon it as Indonesia suffers inflation and further poverty during this period of anti-Western stance. In contrast to this, Suharto's foreign policy is much more reserved in the sense of revolutionary stances that encapsulates the old order. The general prioritized the stability of Indonesia and welcomed aid and investments from outside the country in order to rebuild from the ruined state Soekarno left. Free and active politics evolved from its meaning under the Soekarno years to something more practical, less ideological, and more implemented into building the economics that Soeharto seeks to create. Soeharto rebuilt the bridges out to the west in order to begin the economic building and managed to rebuild regional friendships with neighboring countries, which led to the founding of ASEAN, which then was based in Jakarta under Soeharto's leadership. He founded the IGGI in order to welcome more Western investors into the burgeoning Asian tiger that Indonesia later came to be known. And later on, Indonesia joined APEC in order to further its economic ties, all the while still acting the part of the non-aligned movement. Soeharto himself was elected as the leader of the organization in the mid-90s. However, it was these increasing aids and investors that later plagued Indonesia, as Indonesia became tied down in debt caused by these loans disguised as aids, and later on it would help contribute to the economic crisis and the very downfall of the new order.
During Sukarno's era, it is shown that the government is more allied with the East, as Soekarno viewed the Western powers in a colonial light, justified with Nekolim, in which the Dutch still has plans to govern Indonesia. The Soekarno sees the West and the US and other Western states as imperialist and is not willing to give their sovereignty over to Indonesia. The Sukarno's foreign policy heavily focuses on anti-imperialism. A case study pertaining this is his insistence on gaining sovereignty in Irian Jaya from the Dutch as a way to break free from Western imperialism. Although the Bebas active foreign policy was implemented during this time, there was less emphasis on independence, rather more for anti-colonialism, something Indonesians still applaud for due to its success in completing national integrity after the colonial era. However, it's different with during Soeharto's era, as we are currently allied more with the West, as namely the US and other Western powers. It was also during this time where foreign policy making were delegated to the military instead of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, with the military having a bigger chunk than the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Thus, the military had significant influence over Indonesia's foreign policy. This shapes Indonesia's position in ASEAN as its leader, as it was heavily influenced by the military itself. It was also during this time where Indonesia's relations with other countries such as the USA, Australia, Japan, and other European countries, as the focus of foreign policy has shifted towards a more security-centric one in order to ensure the stability of the country. In regards to the Bebas active policy, Soeharto renounced his predecessor's, Soekarno, confrontational way of doing foreign policy, as shown with Soekarno's confrontation of Malaysia. It was also during these times where relations between Jakarta and Kuala Lumpur started to mend due to Soeharto's efforts to mend the relations between these two countries.
On the next section, we have the literature review. So the first literature that we would like to present is Sukma's work on the year of 1995, with the title of The Evolution of Indonesia's Foreign Policy, an Indonesian View, uploaded at the Journal of Asian Survey. Results Sukma's work on how Indonesia's foreign policy has changed looks at the different ways Soekarno and Soeharto approach it, based on the main idea of Bebas Aktif, or independent and active. Founded by Muhammad Hatta in 1948, The politics of bebas aktif was created to keep Indonesia neutral during the Cold War between the superpowers. Soekarno used this idea by putting in place revolutionary and anti-colonial policies during the guided democracy period from 1959 to 1965. His foreign policy was strongly based on ideas connecting Indonesia with newly independent countries to oppose Western control, especially through the non-aligned movement and his idea of the new emerging forces. This aggressive strategy involved confrontation with Malaysia, showing Soekarno's desire for Indonesia to be a world leader in fighting against colonialism. But it put a lot of pressure on Indonesia's economy because a lot of resources were used for foreign political aims. Soeharto's new order, on the other hand, concentrated on growing the economy, putting importance on keeping things stable at home and building good ties with Western nations. Sukma points out how Soeharto changed the idea of bebas aktif, focusing more on practical economic needs instead of just sticking to an ideology. At the start of his time in power, Soeharto stopped confrontation and worked on building regional partnerships, especially in ASEAN, to bring in foreign investment and help, which he thought was important for the country's growth. In the 1980s, Indonesia became more confident in its role in the region as its economy improved. It joined important groups like APEC and the ASEAN Regional Forum, and this shows a change from Soekarno's focus on big ideas to Suharto's careful approach to improve Indonesia's economy and stability. Sukma says in his work that this different policy shows a change of a time instead of a break from bebas aktif. Both leaders kept the main idea, but changed it to fit their goals. Soekarno focused on fighting colonialism, while Soeharto aimed for stability and economic growth. And in the end, Sukma's work shows that the bebas aktif framework that helped Indonesia's foreign policy change easily with the different situations at home and around the world, linking the ideas and practical actions in Indonesia's role internationally. The second literature that we would like to present is the Michael Laver's work or book titled Indonesia's Foreign Policy and were published by the Royal Institute of International Affairs. So Laver's work on his book of Indonesia's foreign policy shows a clear difference between the policies of Soekarno and Soeharto. And it also points out about how their approach to politics, foreign relations, and also economic plans that were not the same. Soekarno led in a way that was often confrontational and focused on strong ideas. He also pushed back against Western influences and supported socialist countries such as the Soviet Union and China at the time. His foreign policy during the guided democracy period showed a strong desire for change, as it also makes Indonesia a leader among new countries, fighting against what he saw as colonial and imperialist system, especially focusing on Western powers. This policy led to Indonesia leaving the United Nations, apparently, which made the country more isolated from Western allies and also brought it closer to communist countries, even though Indonesia joined the United Nations again later. Suharto's new order took a more practical and cooperative approach, bringing Indonesia closer to Western countries, especially the United States and Japan. This change was meant to make Indonesia's international relations and economy more stable, stepping back from Soekarno's bold confrontations. And again, Suharto's government focused more on economic development than sticking to any specific ideology that might also help them. And this approach helped them to get foreign aid, building relationships with other countries that supported the country's recovery and growth. And his building economics plan created a strong third streak system that aim for national strength instead of believing in strong ideologies. During the change, Lever in his work highlighted the curtain that separates Indonesia's sides with the East and also the West. While Soekarno's focus on ideology and the East shifted to Soeharto's practical approach more towards the West. This change was an important turning point in Indonesia's politics and economy, as it transitioned from Soekarno's guided economics to Soeharto's development-centered strategy, which shifts from more of the East from the Soekarno's time to more of the West throughout the Soeharto's era.
In conclusion, the foreign policy of Indonesia under Suharto and Soekarno represented two distinct approaches inside the same free and active framework. While Suharto's cooperative strategy concentrated on achieving economic stability through close ties with Western countries, Soekarno's combative approach aimed to oppose Western influence and aid anti-colonial forces. These contrasting paths demonstrate how Indonesia's foreign policy changed to meet changing domestic and international demands, transitioning from Suharto's focus on stability and economic prosperity to Soekarno's ideology-driven agenda. By bringing Indonesia closer to nations that rejected Western influence, Soekarno's foreign policy both isolated Indonesia from its Western friends and made it a symbol of resistance to colonialism. Due to his combative style, resources were diverted toward political objectives, which put weight on the nation's economy. Suharto's policies, on the other hand, concentrated on building close economic relations with Western nations, which attracted more international assistance and investment. As a result, Indonesia's economy expanded and its regional importance increased. Although Suharto's focus on collaboration delivered more stability and economic advantages to the nation, Soekarno's strategy gave Indonesia a bold, independent image. In these times, Indonesia was at the crossroads of history twice, and it took different paths each time. And twice over, it created a very different republic built on ever-differing values, the revolutionary republic of the proclamator, and the rising Asian tiger of the indomitable smiling general, all before ending just the same each time in a resignation speech, with the mob calling for the downfall of their regimes. That is all from us, Group 7. Thank you very much for your attention, and we hope you enjoy our presentation. Thank you.